Words hold an invisible weight, a power so immense, that they can breathe life into a weary soul, or crush a spirit into dust. Think about the conversations that we have every single day, friends. We toss words into the air, carelessly sometimes, not realizing that each syllable lands somewhere, deeply, in the heart of another human being. A simple compliment, a warm word of encouragement, can act as a gentle rain on parched earth, bringing someone back to life, when they felt completely lost. On the other hand, a sharp judgment, a thoughtless criticism, can pierce deeper than any physical blade, leaving scars that might take a lifetime to heal. We often underestimate this immense power, yet it rests right there, constantly, right on the tip of our tongues. In the ancient times, long before the modern noise, there lived a magnificent ox, named Nandi Visala. This was no ordinary animal, friends. Nandi Visala was raised by a poor Brahmin, treated with great care, fed with the finest rice, and deeply loved. Nandi Visala grew strong, incredibly powerful, and wanted to repay the kindness of his caretaker. One bright morning, the ox suggested a plan, asking the Brahmin to go to the village merchant, and make a grand wager of 1,000 gold coins, claiming that his ox could pull 100 fully loaded carts, all tied together. The Brahmin, trusting this magnificent creature, agreed, and set up the challenge. The day of the great test arrived, and a massive crowd gathered, buzzing with excitement. The 100 carts were loaded with heavy sand, linked tightly together, and Nandi Visala was yoked, securely, to the very front. The Brahmin, perhaps feeling the pressure of the crowd, or the anxiety of losing 1,000 gold coins, suddenly changed his demeanor. He raised a whip, cracked it loudly in the air, and shouted harshly, commanding the wretched beast to pull, calling the ox a lazy devil. Nandi Visala, hearing these cruel, demeaning words, was instantly heartbroken. His legs planted firmly into the ground, stiff, and unmoving. He thought to himself, that he was not a wretch, that he was not a lazy devil, and wondered why he was spoken to, with such cruelty. And so, the mighty ox refused to move, not even a single inch. The Brahmin lost the wager, lost his money, and sat weeping in deep despair, his heart completely shattered. Nandi Visala approached him gently, and asked, if he had ever broken anything in the house, or stepped on the crops, or misbehaved in any way. The Brahmin, wiping his tears, shook his head, saying no, never, that the ox had always been good. The ox then asked, why he was called a wretch, and why such harsh words were used. The Brahmin realized his terrible mistake, realizing that his own anger, his own careless words, had destroyed their chance at success. Nandi Visala, filled with compassion, offered another chance. He told the Brahmin to go back, to double the wager to 2,000 gold coins, but this time, he must use kind, encouraging words. The next day, the challenge was set once more. The 100 heavy carts stood ready. The Brahmin, having learned his lesson, approached the mighty ox, patted his broad back gently, and spoke with warmth and respect, calling him a fine fellow, a wonderful friend, and encouraging him to show his strength. Hearing these words of love and encouragement, Nandi Visala felt a surge of incredible energy, a joy that lifted his spirit, and with one mighty heave, he pulled the entire line of 100 heavy carts for the entire crowd to see, winning the immense prize, and proving the sheer power of gentle words. This beautiful story, friends, holds a mirror up to our own daily lives, showing us how deeply we react to the tone and intention behind the voices of others. When we are spoken to with respect, with a gentle cadence, our hearts naturally open, our defenses drop, and we find a wellspring of energy to do wonderful things. But when we face a barrage of insults or harsh criticisms, even the strongest among us will freeze, feeling a heavy weight anchor our spirits to the ground. We all have that sensitive nature, that delicate inner world, which responds so vividly to the verbal environment around us. Just look around at the faces of the people you meet every day, in the bustling streets, or in the quiet corners of your own home. Everyone is carrying an invisible burden, a silent struggle, that we might know absolutely nothing about. A young person, trying to find their way in a confusing world, a parent, exhausted from endless responsibilities, or a friend, battling a quiet sorrow. In these fragile moments, the words we choose to speak to them become a matter of profound importance. A simple phrase, spoken with genuine care, asking if they are doing all right, or telling them that their presence matters, can literally pull someone out of a deep abyss. It is like offering a sturdy branch to someone who is slipping down a steep, dangerous cliff. You might never fully realize how a tiny seed of encouragement, planted through your voice, can grow into a massive tree of hope in someone else's life. Yet, we must also look at the other side of this tremendous power, everyone. In moments of sudden anger, when the mind is clouded by frustration, we often unleash words that act like wildfire, burning down the beautiful forests of our relationships in mere seconds. It is a strange tragedy that the people we love the most are often the ones who receive our sharpest, most careless remarks. We assume they will understand, we assume they will forgive, but hurtful words have a cruel way of lingering, echoing in the mind, long after the argument has ended. You can apologize, you can try to sweep the ashes away, but the burn marks remain, silently altering the landscape of trust and affection. There is a powerful record in the ancient texts, regarding a massive conflict, that perfectly illustrates how words of escalation can bring entire communities to the brink of absolute destruction. Long ago, in a lush, green valley, there were two great clans, known as the Sakyans and the Kolians. These two proud families lived on opposite banks of the beautiful Rohini River. For generations, they shared this precious water, peacefully irrigating their vast fields and sustaining their families, without any major disputes. However, one fateful year, a terrible drought struck the land, the sun beat down relentlessly, and the once mighty river shrank to a shallow, muddy stream. Fear and anxiety began to grip the hearts of the farmers, on both sides, as they watched their crops slowly wither under the scorching sun. Desperation breeds tension, friends, and soon, the simple laborers, who used to greet each other across the water, started to argue. It began with small complaints, a farmer from one side, shouting that they needed the water more, and a farmer from the other side, yelling back with equal frustration. But anger is a highly contagious disease, and the words quickly turned, from complaints about water, to vicious, deeply personal insults. The Sakyan farmers began to mock the Kolians, bringing up old, forgotten rumors, insulting their ancestors, and attacking their character. The Kolians, stung by these harsh words, fired back with even greater venom, calling the Sakyans arrogant and worthless. What started as a dispute over resources, completely transformed into a violent clash of pride, fueled entirely by toxic speech. The angry words of the farmers traveled quickly back to the leaders of both clans, growing more exaggerated and more offensive with every retelling. The leaders, blinded by the insults thrown at their heritage, did not stop to investigate the truth or seek a calm dialogue. Instead, they let the poisonous words dictate their actions, and they sounded the drums of war. Thousands of men, armed with sharp weapons, marched to the dry riverbed, their hearts filled with hatred, ready to slaughter their own neighbors, all because of a spiral of angry, uncontrolled speech. When the Buddha saw this massive tragedy unfolding, he did not send an army, nor did he use harsh commands, to stop the impending massacre. He simply walked, with supreme calmness, right into the center of the battlefield, and sat down quietly, on the cracked earth, between the two enraged armies. The sheer peace of his presence caused the soldiers to lower their weapons, in respectful silence. Then, the Buddha began to speak, using words that were soft, clear, and deeply piercing. He did not scold them, but gently asked the leaders what the true value of water was. The proud leaders, looking down at the muddy puddle, admitted that water, though important, had very little monetary value. The Buddha then asked them to consider the value of human blood, the value of the lives of their sons, their brothers, and their fathers, who stood ready to die on that field. The leaders, struck by the profound truth in his gentle voice, immediately realized that human life is absolutely priceless, and cannot be measured. The Buddha continued, asking them why they would trade something of immeasurable value, for something of so little worth, letting mere words of pride push them into destroying their own families. Through these few, carefully chosen, compassionate words, the Buddha completely dissolved the hatred in the hearts of thousands. The weapons were dropped, tears of realization fell upon the dry earth, and a horrific war was entirely prevented by the sheer power of mindful speech. This remarkable event teaches us something vital about the words we choose when we are faced with conflict. When someone speaks harshly to us, our immediate instinct is to throw a harsher word back, to defend our pride, and to win the argument. But winning an argument at the cost of destroying a relationship, or shattering someone's peace of mind, is a terrible victory, friends. We become like those ancient farmers, letting a small disagreement over water turn into a bloody war of insults. If we can just pause, take a slow, deep breath, and choose words of understanding, rather than words of retaliation, we can become the peacemakers in our own daily lives. There is another side to the danger of speech, which is just as destructive, but operates in a much quieter, more insidious way. This is the act of gossiping, spreading rumors, and speaking ill of others behind their backs. It is a common habit, a way people try to bond with each other, by tearing someone else down. But the ancient teachings warn us, very strictly, about the heavy karmic weight of this kind of divisive speech. When we speak badly about someone, we are not just harming their reputation, we are actively poisoning our own minds, filling our hearts with dark, negative energy, that slowly suffocates our own happiness. Consider the tragic story of a monk named Kokalika, who lived during the time of the Buddha. Kokalika developed a deep, burning envy toward the two chief disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana. These two disciples were beloved, highly respected, and deeply wise, which only made Kokalika's jealousy grow stronger every day. Unable to contain his bitter feelings, Kokalika began to spread malicious rumors, whispering to anyone who would listen, that Sariputta and Moggallana were corrupt, that they had evil desires, and that they were deceiving everyone. He used his words, like hidden daggers, trying to assassinate their noble character. When these rumors reached the Buddha, he called Kokalika to him, and spoke with profound compassion, urging him to stop. The Buddha warned him gently, explaining that Sariputta and Moggallana were pure in heart, and that holding such baseless malice, and speaking such terrible slander, would bring immense suffering to Kokalika himself. But Kokalika, completely blinded by his own toxic pride, and consumed by the habit of speaking ill, refused to listen. He rejected the gentle advice, and continued his campaign of hateful whispers, convinced that his words would somehow elevate his own status, by bringing others down. The consequences of his relentless, venomous speech were truly heartbreaking. The negative energy he generated, the constant state of bitterness in his mind, eventually manifested in his physical body. The texts describe how he fell gravely ill, suffering intensely, his body ravaged by the very poison he had been spitting out into the world. His life was utterly destroyed, not by an external enemy, not by a physical weapon, but entirely by his own words, and the dark intentions behind them. This story is a powerful, sobering reminder that when we throw mud at others, our own hands get dirty first, and the hatred we speak ultimately builds a prison of suffering for our own souls. Words are like seeds, everyone, scattered into the fertile soil of the universe. If we plant seeds of thorns, of complaints, of judgments, and of anger, we will inevitably walk through a painful, thorny path in our own lives. But if we choose to plant seeds of kindness, of gratitude, of encouragement, and of genuine love, we will find ourselves surrounded by a beautiful, blooming garden of peace. It takes practice, a lot of mindful practice, to train the tongue, to become an instrument of healing, rather than a weapon of destruction. Sometimes, the most powerful words we can offer are not profound pieces of advice, but simply words that validate another person's feelings. When a friend comes to you, crying over a broken heart, or a heavy disappointment, they usually are not looking for a grand lecture, or a quick solution. They just want to be heard, they want to know that their pain is recognized. Saying something as simple as, "I am so sorry you are going through this," or, "Your feelings are completely valid, and I am here for you," can be the exact medicine their wounded spirit desperately needs. You do not need to be a philosopher, or a great speaker, to save a person's day, you just need a heart that is willing to listen, and a voice that is willing to offer warmth. Even the way we speak to ourselves, in the quiet solitude of our own minds, carries this exact same power. How often do we become our own worst enemies, using our inner voice, to criticize our mistakes, to doubt our abilities, and to remind ourselves of our past failures? If we spoke to our friends, the way we sometimes speak to ourselves, we would probably have no friends left. We must extend that same gentle speech, that same compassion, inward. When you make a mistake, instead of calling yourself foolish, or worthless, try speaking to yourself, like a loving parent would speak to a child. Remind yourself that it is okay to stumble, that learning is a messy process, and that you are always worthy of love, regardless of your imperfections. The journey of purifying our speech begins with the simple act of pausing. Before you let a sentence leave your lips, especially in moments of high emotion, take a brief moment to ask yourself a few quiet questions. Is what I am about to say completely true? Is it helpful to the person receiving it? Is it the right time to say this? And most importantly, is it being spoken from a place of genuine kindness? If the answer to any of these is no, then perhaps the best choice is the beautiful, profound peace of silence. Silence, friends, is not empty, it is often full of answers, full of space, and full of healing energy that words could never possibly convey. When we look back at the grand tapestry of our lives, we will not remember the days we spent in silence, but we will always remember the exact words that shaped our destiny. We remember the teacher, who told us we had a special talent, giving us the confidence to pursue our dreams. We remember the stranger, who offered a kind word on a terrible day, restoring our faith in humanity. And sadly, we also remember the sharp criticisms, that made us doubt our worth for years. We are all walking around, carrying a library of words in our hearts, written by the people we have met along the way. Let us strive, with all our might, to write beautiful, inspiring chapters, in the hearts of others, leaving behind a legacy of light and gentle warmth. Imagine a world, where everyone understood the true weight of their voice. A world where gossip is replaced by genuine praise, where arguments are dissolved by compassionate questioning, and where the first response to someone's pain is a chorus of supportive, loving voices. This is not a distant, impossible utopia, friends, it is a reality that we can start building today, right here, in this very moment, simply by changing the way we speak to the person sitting next to us. It costs absolutely nothing to offer a word of kindness, yet the wealth it brings to the world is entirely beyond calculation. There was once a young, radiant novice in the ancient monastic order, whose presence was like a breath of fresh air to everyone he met. His heart was so light and his words were so incredibly sweet that people naturally flocked to him just to hear him speak. One day, a deeply troubled man, carrying a heavy burden of sorrow and anger, came to the monastery, looking for some sort of relief. He approached the young novice, and poured out a stream of bitter complaints, about his family, his neighbors, and the unfairness of his entire life. The young novice sat there, completely still, listening with bright, attentive eyes, never once interrupting, and never once offering a judgment. When the man finally exhausted his stream of bitter words, the novice leaned forward, smiled warmly, and offered a single, beautiful thought about the incredible resilience of the human spirit that resides deep within every single person. The novice pointed out, with genuine admiration, that despite all the tremendous hardships, despite the immense, crushing pain, the man had survived, and still possessed a beating heart that cared deeply for justice, and for simple fairness. Hearing these completely unexpected words, of pure, unfiltered validation, the heavy, suffocating burden, simply melted away, from the man's weary, drooping shoulders. He had walked in, ready for a bitter fight, but he walked out, with a profound sense, of being entirely understood, his spirit completely renewed, by a handful of carefully chosen, gentle words. This is the true magic, friends, of recognizing the inherent good in someone else, and speaking it aloud, for them to hear. Let us travel back, for a moment, to the bustling, ancient city of Savatthi, to witness the quiet, unshakable strength of a remarkable woman, named Visakha. Visakha was married, at a very young age, into a phenomenally wealthy family, but her father-in-law, a proud man named Migera, followed a path of extreme, harsh, and punishing asceticism. He regularly invited rough, unrefined ascetics into their beautiful, peaceful home, and demanded, with great authority, that Visakha pay strict, unwavering reverence to these loud, demanding men. Visakha, having a highly refined, deeply peaceful heart, felt profoundly uncomfortable, yet she did not rebel with sudden anger, nor did she use sharp, disrespectful words, to denounce her stubborn father-in-law. Instead, she utilized the profound, delicate art, of skillful, compassionate speech. One bright morning, a highly respected, serene monk, walked quietly past their grand, imposing house, seeking his daily alms. Migera, completely ignoring the holy man, continued to eat his lavish, expensive sweet rice pudding, turning his back to the street. Visakha, standing quietly nearby, spoke softly, but clearly, to the waiting monk, saying that her father-in-law was merely eating stale fare, feeding only on the merits of his past lives, and creating absolutely no new goodness for his future. Migera, hearing this bold statement, was instantly furious, his face turning red, and he immediately ordered her to be thrown out of the grand house forever. But Visakha remained completely calm, her voice steady, requesting that the wise, respected elders of the local community be called forth to fairly judge her words. When the venerable elders arrived, she calmly explained, with absolute, unwavering respect, the true, deep meaning behind her seemingly harsh statement. She explained, beautifully, that relying entirely on past wealth and past good deeds, without generating any new kindness or generosity in the present, is exactly like eating stale, lifeless, leftover food. Her words, spoken without a single trace of malice, but filled with profound, radiant wisdom and undeniable truth, pierced right through the thick, stubborn ignorance of Migera. He was so deeply moved by her absolute clarity and her gentle, forgiving strength, that he completely and totally changed his old, stubborn ways. He embraced the path of generosity, ultimately finding profound, lasting, inner peace, and he even began to call Visakha his own mother in the Dhamma, out of sheer, overwhelming gratitude. Friends, carefully notice how Visakha did not shout, did not hurl cruel insults, and did not demand immediate, blind obedience. She used her words as a precise, delicate, healing instrument, cutting away the thick layers of deep misunderstanding without causing a single drop of emotional bleeding or unnecessary pain. In our modern, fast-paced times, within the very walls of your own homes, this exact same, incredible power is constantly and endlessly at play. Think about the young children growing up in a complex, demanding world, where they are constantly bombarded with completely unrealistic expectations from every single direction. The words they hear from their parents, from their guardians, become their own internal voice, echoing in their minds for the rest of their entire lives. If a child hears constant, nagging complaints and sharp, biting criticisms, they will slowly build a dark fortress of deep self-doubt around their tender, fragile hearts. But, if a child is consistently bathed in words of gentle, loving encouragement, even when they make huge, messy mistakes, they will grow magnificent wings of unbreakable, soaring confidence. They will step out into the world, ready to face any stormy sky, because they know, deep in their bones, that they are inherently valuable and truly loved. You are not just raising children, everyone, you are actively writing the internal script that will guide their future decisions, their future relationships, and their ultimate, lasting happiness. A word of praise, spoken at the exact right moment, can literally alter the entire trajectory of a young, developing life. There is a profoundly moving, deeply emotional account, hidden away in the ancient, sacred texts, about a very young, completely destitute boy, named Sapaka. Sapaka was a tragic orphan, treated with cruel, unimaginable, daily harshness, by his own, heartless uncle. One dark, terrifying, moonless night, the cruel uncle dragged the young, helpless, crying boy into the middle of a frightening, lonely graveyard. With a heart full of malice, the uncle tied the small child to a decaying, cold corpse, leaving him there, completely alone, to face the howling wild animals and the terrifying, creeping shadows. The tiny boy wept violently, his heart pounding against his ribs, consumed by an absolute, freezing, paralyzing terror, truly believing that his short, tragic, painful life had come to a miserable, horrifying end. Just as the crushing darkness felt completely and totally overwhelming, a soft, warm, golden light appeared in the far distance. It was the fully awakened Buddha, walking with serene, silent, floating steps, right through the grim, terrifying, death-filled graveyard. Seeing the trembling, terrified, helpless child, the Buddha did not perform a grand, flashing, earth-shattering miracle to magically break the thick ropes. Instead, he simply projected a warm, gentle, enveloping light, and spoke a few, incredibly soft, deeply comforting words. He looked at Sappaka, with boundless, infinite compassion, and told the boy, not to fear, speaking gently, telling him that a safe, loving, unshakable refuge was right there, waiting for him. Those simple, beautifully spoken words carried such an immense, pure, sweeping wave of unconditional love that the boy's paralyzing, icy fear simply vanished in an instant. The gripping terror, the deep despair, the overwhelming, suffocating darkness were entirely and completely swept away by the sheer, healing power of a truly compassionate voice. Sappaka, entirely freed from his invisible, crushing chains of terror, followed the serene Buddha, and eventually became a deeply peaceful, fully enlightened, radiant soul. He transformed a night of absolute, unspeakable horror into a beautiful lifetime of radiant, boundless freedom, all because of a single, gentle greeting. This, friends, is the literal, life-saving, miraculous potential of what we consciously choose to say. You might never find yourself wandering in a spooky, midnight graveyard, untying a frightened, crying child, but you will, absolutely, encounter people every single day who are tied tightly. They are tied to the cold, heavy corpses of their own past traumas, their creeping anxieties, and their deep, unspoken, hidden fears. A hard-working colleague who is silently struggling with a heavy, crushing depression, or a quiet neighbor who feels completely and totally invisible in a massive, crowded city. When you take a brief moment to truly look them in the eye and offer a simple word of genuine, felt warmth, you are offering them that exact same, beautiful golden light that cuts right through the terrifying, lonely darkness. You become, in that very moment, a beacon of safety in their chaotic, stormy world. In the ancient, beautiful teachings, there is a profound, recurring emphasis placed on something called noble, right speech. It is not just about avoiding bad words, it is a refined, daily art form consisting of 4 deeply important qualities. Words should be completely truthful, they should bring people together in harmony, they should be spoken gently, and they should carry real, profound meaning. Truth, when spoken without gentleness, can feel exactly like a blunt, heavy, jagged rock, thrown aggressively, right at someone's face. It might be a real rock, it might be entirely true, but it only causes pain, and deep, lasting injury. Imagine a proud, wealthy king, who loved to hunt, riding deep into a lush, emerald, ancient forest. The king, completely separated from his royal guards, became hopelessly, and totally lost, wandering in circles, as the sun began to set. Frustrated, thirsty, and angry, he stumbled upon a quiet, humble hermit, sitting peacefully, under a massive, ancient banyan tree. The arrogant king, used to giving constant, harsh orders, marched up to the hermit, and shouted loudly, demanding to know the quickest path back to his grand, luxurious palace. He called the hermit a dirty beggar, and ordered him to speak immediately. The serene hermit kept his eyes gently closed, his breathing slow, and remained absolutely, completely silent, not moving a single, tiny muscle. The king grew furious, drawing his sharp, gleaming sword, ready to threaten the silent, peaceful man. Just at that tense, dangerous moment, the king's wise, trusted minister, who had been frantically searching, burst through the thick bushes. Seeing the dangerous situation, the minister quickly bowed low, and spoke with a voice, full of deep, genuine respect, and absolute gentleness. He praised the peace of the forest, wished the hermit radiant health, and politely, softly asked, if he might point them, toward the city road. The hermit slowly opened his eyes, smiled a warm, radiant smile, and gently pointed his hand, indicating the correct, safe path. The arrogant king, confused and angry, demanded to know why the hermit ignored a royal king, but answered a simple, lowly minister. The hermit spoke, his voice like a clear, flowing river, explaining that the forest, and those who live in true peace, do not respond to the harsh, violent voice of a demanding conqueror. They only open their hearts, and offer their precious guidance, to the soft, harmonious voice of a respectful, humble guest, seeking genuine connection. This beautiful, quiet lesson echoes loudly in every single interaction we have today. When we demand things from our partners, from our co-workers, or from our friends, using a harsh, entitled, commanding tone, we instantly close the doors to their willing, generous hearts. But when we approach them with the soft, respectful voice of a humble guest, honoring their presence, they will gladly and joyfully point us toward the beautiful path of harmony. Let us take a quiet, honest moment to truly examine the way we speak when we are feeling rushed or deeply tired, because those are the exact moments when our true habits often slip out, completely unchecked, bypassing our mindful, internal filters. When the body is utterly exhausted, and the mind is frantically racing, we tend to forget the delicate, beautiful fragility of the human heart, standing right in front of us, friends. We might snap at a loved one, or brush off a genuine question, with a heavy, irritated sigh, completely unaware that our careless tone has just planted a tiny, sharp seed of sadness in their day. It is in these vulnerable, ordinary moments that the profound practice of mindful speech becomes the most crucial and the most challenging, beautiful art form we can ever learn to master. Let us explore a profound, deeply moving story from the ancient royal courts to see how one single, wise conversation, quite literally, saved thousands of innocent lives. In the powerful, wealthy kingdom of Kosala, there ruled a mighty king named Pasenadi. One dark, suffocating night, the king woke up, completely drenched in a cold sweat, his heart hammering in his chest, having experienced 16 deeply terrifying, vivid dreams. The king, absolutely paralyzed by fear, firmly believed that these dark visions were a terrible omen, predicting the sudden end of his grand life, or the total collapse of his entire kingdom. Desperate for answers, and blinded by his own panic, the king quickly summoned his most trusted, elite royal advisors. These men, seeing a golden opportunity to gain massive wealth and secure their own power, gave the frightened king some truly horrific, cruel advice. They told him, with absolute, solemn conviction, that the only way to prevent this looming disaster was to perform a massive, unprecedented sacrifice. They demanded that the king must slaughter hundreds of majestic elephants, hundreds of beautiful horses, and even hundreds of innocent, poor human beings, to appease the unseen, angry forces. The king, completely lost in his blinding terror, and unable to think clearly, immediately agreed, and the terrifying, grim preparations rapidly began. A dark, heavy shadow of grief quickly fell over the entire capital city, as innocent people and helpless animals were forcefully gathered, crying and wailing, waiting for their cruel, unjust execution. It was at this exact, pivotal moment, that Queen Malika, a woman of extraordinary, radiant wisdom, and immense compassion, stepped forward. Malika did not run into the throne room, screaming wildly, nor did she attack the king, with harsh, bitter insults, calling him a monster, or a foolish tyrant. She understood, with profound clarity, that when a person is deeply trapped, in the blinding grip of fear, shouting at them, will only make them build thicker, taller walls of defense. Instead, she approached her terrified husband, with a calm, flowing grace, her face radiating absolute peace, and her voice, as soft, and as soothing, as a gentle, evening breeze. She sat down closely beside him, taking his trembling hands in hers, and began to speak, using words that were incredibly gentle, yet sharp enough, to cut through his thick delusion. She softly asked the king, a simple, profound question, inquiring how the deep sorrow, and the agonizing pain, of one living being, could possibly bring lasting joy or genuine safety, to another. She gently guided his mind, asking him to imagine the sheer, crushing heartbreak of the mothers losing their precious children in this massive, pointless sacrifice. With immense, skillful patience, Queen Malika pointed out that true, lasting protection never comes from spreading violence or causing widespread terror, but only from cultivating a generous, peaceful, and highly compassionate heart. Her beautiful, perfectly chosen words, spoken with such deep, unwavering love, and absolute logical clarity, slowly pierced through the king's heavy, suffocated panic. The dark, terrifying fog that had clouded his mind completely vanished, replaced by a sudden, brilliant light of profound realization. King Pasenadi, deeply moved, and profoundly ashamed of his blind fear, immediately cancelled the horrific sacrifice, ordering the immediate release of every single captive, human and animal alike. The entire city erupted in massive, joyous celebration, tears of profound relief, washing the streets, all because one brave, incredibly wise woman knew exactly how to use the immense, healing power of her voice. She did not need a physical weapon, she did not need an army, she only needed the profound truth, wrapped delicately, in a blanket of loving, compassionate speech, to conquer the greatest darkness. This story, everyone, is a magnificent, shining testament to the fact that our words truly have the power to alter the very fabric of reality, turning a grim tragedy into a beautiful, lasting triumph of life. When we look at our own, modern lives, we might not be stopping royal executions, but we are absolutely, constantly, saving people from their own internal, silent disasters. Have you ever noticed how the atmosphere in a room completely shifts when someone walks in and starts speaking with genuine, bright enthusiasm? Their positive, warm words act like a sudden burst of brilliant sunlight, piercing through a heavy, gray, cloudy sky. Suddenly, the people around them sit up a little straighter, their heavy burdens feel a bit lighter, and a contagious, beautiful energy ripples through the entire space. This is not just a mere coincidence, friends, it is the tangible, vibrating energy of spoken words, actively reshaping the emotional environment. Conversely, we have all experienced the deep, draining exhaustion that comes from being around constant, relentless complaining. We all know people who seem to carry a dark, heavy storm cloud wherever they go, using their voice exclusively to point out the flaws, the annoyances, and the unfairness of the world. They complain about the morning traffic, they complain about the changing weather, and they endlessly criticize the small, harmless mistakes of everyone around them. Being entirely bathed in this kind of negative, heavy speech is exactly like slowly breathing in invisible, toxic fumes, which gradually and silently suffocates our own joy and drains our precious energy. This brings us to a very subtle, often overlooked aspect of mindful communication, which the ancient teachings refer to as the avoidance of empty, idle chatter. Idle chatter is not just about spreading malicious gossip, it is the habit of talking endlessly, without any real, beneficial purpose, simply to fill the quiet, beautiful space of silence with meaningless noise. In our highly connected, digital age, we are constantly flooded with a never-ending stream of shallow, sensationalized words, debating things that do not matter, and arguing over trivial, fleeting opinions. We spend hours typing furious paragraphs or speaking heated words about celebrities or distant scandals, completely wasting our precious, limited life force. When we engage in this kind of frivolous, empty speech, we scatter our mental energy, leaving our minds fragmented, agitated, and completely restless. It is exactly like leaving a water faucet, dripping constantly, slowly draining the entire reservoir of our inner peace, one tiny, useless drop at a time. The wise ones always advise us to conserve our energy, to gather our scattered thoughts, and to speak only when our words are more beautiful and more meaningful than the profound silence they are interrupting. Imagine how much deeper and richer our relationships would become if we simply stopped filling every pause with noise, and instead learned to be perfectly and completely comfortable, just sharing a quiet, peaceful presence with the people we care about. Let us consider another beautiful, touching event from the vast, ancient records concerning a very unique and often misunderstood monk named Lakantaka Badiya. This particular monk had a very unfortunate physical appearance, being extremely short in stature, almost like a young child, and possessing a strange, very high-pitched, unusual voice. Because of his outward appearance, the younger novices, and the visiting lay people, constantly mocked him, pulling playfully, but disrespectfully, at his robes, patting his head, and calling him demeaning, belittling names. They treated him exactly like a harmless, funny toy, completely blind to the immense, radiant spiritual depth that resided within his quiet, peaceful heart. Badiya, however, never once reacted with anger, never raised his unusual voice in protest, and never allowed their careless, ignorant words to disturb his profound, unshakable inner calm. One bright afternoon, a large, noisy group of visitors were once again teasing him, laughing loudly, and making cruel, thoughtless jokes about his small stature. The fully awakened Buddha, observing this entire scene with his infinite, deep compassion, decided that it was the perfect time to use his powerful voice to shatter their blinding ignorance. He called the entire assembly together, asking everyone to look closely at the small, quiet monk sitting peacefully in the corner. The Buddha did not scold the crowd with harsh, angry words, but instead, he used words of profound, soaring praise to completely elevate Badiya in the eyes of everyone present. He declared, with a voice that resonated like a deep, beautiful bell, that this small monk, despite his outward form, possessed an incredibly vast, powerful, and totally liberated mind. He explained, beautifully, that true greatness is never measured by the height of a physical body, or the sound of a voice, but entirely by the purity, the wisdom, and the unshakable peace of the human heart. The Buddha's words, so full of absolute truth and deep respect, instantly silenced the laughing crowd, replacing their cruel mockery with a profound, sudden sense of awe and deep reverence. From that day forward, no one ever dared to speak a single unkind word to Lokantaka Bhatia again. The Buddha had used his voice as a magnificent, protective shield, wrapping the small monk in a cloak of undeniable dignity, while simultaneously teaching the crowd a vital, life-changing lesson about true value. This story beautifully illustrates how we can use our own voices to stand up for those who are misunderstood, marginalized, or constantly overlooked by a superficial society. When we see someone being unfairly judged or quietly mocked, we have the immense, beautiful power to speak up for them, to highlight their hidden strengths, and to completely change the narrative using words of genuine appreciation. It is incredibly easy, everyone, to simply join the crowd, to laugh at the careless jokes, and to participate in the casual tearing down of another human being. But it takes true, profound courage and a deeply beautiful heart to be the one voice that firmly says no, that chooses to uplift, and that insists on finding the good in every single person. When you choose to speak words of praise and genuine recognition, you become a powerful, radiant light in a world that is too often completely obsessed with pointing out the shadows. Your words can become the sturdy, reliable bridge that helps someone cross over from a place of deep insecurity to a solid ground of self-worth. Think about the immense power of saying a simple, heartfelt thank you to the people who quietly support your life every single day. The person who cleans the office, the one who delivers your daily mail, or the family member who silently makes your morning coffee without ever asking for any grand recognition. These small, daily acts of service often go completely unnoticed, fading into the busy background of our frantic, rushing lives. But when you stop, look them directly in the eyes, and speak a word of profound, genuine gratitude, you are essentially telling them that their existence is deeply valued, and that their quiet efforts are truly seen and deeply appreciated. Gratitude, friends, is perhaps the most beautiful and the most healing frequency that the human voice can possibly broadcast out into the vast universe. It completely rewrites our internal programming, shifting our focus away from what is lacking and shining a brilliant light on the immense abundance that is already present right here in our lives. When we speak words of gratitude, we are not just making someone else feel wonderful, we are actively healing our own hearts, dissolving the tight, heavy knots of dissatisfaction, and opening ourselves up to a river of genuine, lasting joy. There is a very deep, subtle connection between the breath in our lungs and the words that we choose to form. The ancient masters understood that speech is literally breath made manifest. It is the invisible life force, shaped by the mind, and pushed out into the physical world. Therefore, when the mind is agitated, the breath becomes short and ragged, and the words that follow are often sharp, scattered, and deeply hurtful. But when the mind is calm, when we take a moment to breathe deeply and center ourselves, our words naturally become smooth, grounded, and incredibly soothing to hear. This is why, taking a single, deep, conscious breath before answering a difficult question, or responding to an angry accusation, is a practice of immense, unparalleled power. That one breath gives you the vital, precious space to step back from the burning fire of reaction and to step into the cool, clear water of conscious response. It allows you to choose your words exactly like a skilled, master artist chooses the perfect colors for a beautiful masterpiece, rather than just throwing buckets of messy paint randomly at a blank canvas. We are all artists, everyone, painting the emotional landscape of our world, with every single syllable that we allow to leave our lips. Let us remember that a harsh word, spoken in a fleeting second of anger, cannot be easily erased, even with 1,000 desperate apologies. It is like driving a sharp, rusty nail into a beautiful, solid piece of wood. You can pull the nail out later, you can try to smooth the surface, but the deep, dark hole will always remain. Therefore, let us walk through this life with a deep, profound reverence for the incredible tool of human speech. Let us make a quiet, firm commitment to use our voices to heal, to mend broken spirits, and to constantly build each other up in this challenging, often difficult journey. We hold the power of life right on the tip of our tongues. Let us use it with absolute, beautiful grace. Imagine a scenario right in your own workplace where a colleague makes a very public, embarrassing mistake during an important presentation. The room falls completely silent, the tension is incredibly thick, and you can see the sheer panic rising in their flushed, nervous face. At that exact moment, someone could easily make a sarcastic comment, or whisper a sharp critique, instantly crushing the person's remaining confidence, and sending them into a spiral of deep professional shame. But what if, instead, you choose to speak up, with a calm, supportive voice, gently pointing out that everyone faces unexpected challenges, and gracefully steering the conversation toward a constructive, helpful solution? That simple, courageous act of verbal kindness acts exactly like a safety net, catching a falling acrobat before they hit the hard, cold ground. You not only save their dignity in that terrifying moment, but you also completely transform the entire culture of the room, teaching everyone present that mistakes are met with understanding, not with cruel, punishing words. This is how we build a truly compassionate world, friends, not through grand, sweeping, political mandates, but through tiny, beautiful, courageous moments of choosing gentle speech when harshness would have been the easier, more common path. Our words are the invisible bricks with which we constantly build the entire structure of our shared reality. Every single structure that we choose to build in the quiet spaces of our shared reality depends entirely on the delicate foundation of our daily intentions, friends. When we wake up each and every morning, we are essentially handed a brand new, beautifully blank canvas and a vibrant, boundless palette of spoken words. We can choose to paint a landscape of harsh, jagged edges, filled with the dark, heavy colors of criticism and relentless complaint, or we can choose to paint a magnificent, glowing sunrise, using the warm, soft, inviting colors of profound empathy and genuine understanding. The choice is entirely ours, resting quietly, right there, on the tip of our own tongues. Let us travel back to the wealthy, bustling merchant city of ancient Savatthi to visit the magnificent, grand home of a man named Anathapindika. He was known, far and wide, as a man of immense, unparalleled generosity, a deeply peaceful soul, who supported thousands of wandering monks and desperate, hungry poor people every single day. His home was usually a sanctuary of absolute, radiant peace, a place where soft, gentle chanting, and kind, harmonious conversations, filled the fragrant, airy halls. However, this beautiful, tranquil peace, was suddenly, and violently shattered, when his youngest son, married a young woman, named Sujata. Sujata came from a family, of extraordinary, unimaginable wealth, and she brought with her, a towering, incredibly sharp mountain, of toxic, blinding arrogance. She completely refused, to show any respect, to her kind father-in-law. She treated her quiet, gentle husband, with absolute, biting disdain, and she constantly screamed, at the hard-working, frightened servants. From the moment the sun rose, until the deep, dark night fell, her voice echoed, through the grand house, exactly like a harsh, piercing siren, complaining about the food, criticizing the decorations, and throwing massive, violent tantrums, over the smallest, most insignificant details. The once peaceful home, completely transformed, into a terrifying, tense battlefield, all because of one, single, uncontrolled voice. One quiet, bright morning, the fully awakened Buddha visited the grand home, for a simple, silent meal. As he sat down, in the beautifully decorated, quiet courtyard, a sudden, terrifying explosion, of screaming and crashing, erupted from the back, of the large house. Sujata was shouting, throwing heavy objects, and using incredibly cruel, demeaning words, to punish a terrified, weeping servant. Anathapindika, his face burning, with deep, profound embarrassment, bowed his head low, quietly apologizing, to the serene, peaceful guest, explaining that his new daughter-in-law, was completely uncontrollable, and deeply, terribly fierce. The Buddha did not frown, he did not shake his head, in harsh, silent judgment, and he certainly did not suggest, throwing the angry young woman, out into the cold streets. Instead, he smiled, a very soft, deeply knowing smile, and gently asked Anathapindika, to call the screaming woman, to come forward, and sit before him. Sujata, still fuming, with a red, angry face, and a heart full of burning rage, stomped heavily, into the quiet courtyard. She expected to be harshly scolded, she expected a loud, embarrassing lecture, about absolute, unquestioning obedience, and she was fully prepared, to shout right back, with all her bitter might. But the Buddha, looked at her, with eyes that held the vast, cooling depth, of a calm, silent ocean. He did not raise his voice, he did not point a sharp, accusing finger, and he did not use a single, judgmental word. Instead, he spoke to her, exactly like a wise, compassionate teacher, speaking to a highly intelligent, but deeply confused student. He softly asked her, if she knew, that in this wide, complex world, there were exactly 7, entirely different types, of wives, and he asked her, with genuine, gentle curiosity, which type, she considered herself to be. This completely unexpected, fascinating, intellectual question, instantly stopped her racing, angry mind, right in its tracks. Sujata, highly intelligent, but completely trapped, in her own emotional storm, suddenly forgot her burning anger, and felt a deep, genuine spark, of intense curiosity. She sat down, her breathing slowly calming, and quietly admitted, that she did not understand, the deep meaning, of his gentle words, asking him, to please explain these 7 types, in greater, clearer detail. By simply changing the tone, and shifting the entire direction, of the conversation, the Buddha had completely disarmed, a highly explosive, dangerous emotional bomb, without causing a single, tiny spark. The Buddha then spoke, his voice flowing perfectly, like a cool, refreshing stream, pouring over a hot, parched desert. He described the wife who is like a ruthless murderer, completely lacking compassion. He described the wife who is like a greedy thief, constantly stealing joy, and he described the wife who is like a cruel tyrant, shouting and dominating the entire household. As Sujata listened closely to these crystal-clear, deeply honest descriptions, she felt a sudden, sharp pang of profound, internal recognition, realizing with horror that her own harsh words had made her exactly like a cruel, punishing tyrant. But the Buddha did not stop there. He continued smoothly, describing the beautiful, radiant alternatives. He spoke of the wife who is like a deeply caring mother, the wife who is like a loyal, trusted sister, the wife who is like a joyful, long-lost friend, and finally, the wife who is like a calm, patient, unshakable servant to peace. He painted these beautiful, glowing pictures, using words of such immense, undeniable grace, that Sujata's hard, arrogant heart completely melted, washing away her toxic pride in a massive, overwhelming flood of genuine, healing tears. When the Buddha gently asked her again which path she wished to choose for her own precious life, Sujata bowed low, her voice completely changed, now soft, entirely humbled, and deeply sincere. She promised, right then and there, to become a presence of peace, to speak with the gentle loyalty of a true friend, and to completely abandon her harsh, terrifying ways. Her entire life, and the entire atmosphere of that massive, sprawling household, was permanently and beautifully saved, all because one person chose to use a voice of profound, analyzing wisdom, instead of a voice of harsh, reactionary anger. This beautiful, ancient interaction holds a massive, completely relevant mirror up to our own, modern, daily struggles, everyone. How often do we encounter people who are behaving exactly like Sujata, shouting loudly, acting arrogant, and trying to dominate the space with their heavy, negative energy? Our immediate, natural instinct is usually to fight fire with fire, to raise our own voices louder, to defend our own pride, and to completely crush their bad behavior with our own harsh words. But adding more fire to a burning building will never, ever, bring peace. It only creates a much larger, completely devastating pile of dark, smoking ashes. If we can remember to take a slow, deep breath, and channel that same, profound, cooling presence, we can completely shift the energy of any difficult, terrifying encounter. We can ask a gentle, unexpected question, we can completely validate the hidden pain beneath their loud anger, or we can simply hold a space of absolute, quiet dignity, refusing to participate in their chaotic, swirling storm. It takes an immense, profound level of internal strength to speak softly to someone who is screaming, but that soft, unwavering voice is the exact, powerful tool that can shatter the thickest, hardest illusions of a suffering mind. We must also look deeply at how our words affect those who are naturally quiet, sensitive, and easily crushed by the heavy weight of harsh, unthinking criticism. There is another, incredibly moving story, from the time of the Buddha, concerning two brothers, who both decided to enter the peaceful, monastic life. The older brother, named Mahapanthaka, was incredibly brilliant, possessing a sharp, quick mind, easily memorizing hundreds of complex, ancient verses in a matter of mere days. He was widely praised, highly respected, and deeply admired by the entire, massive community. The younger brother, named Kulapanthaka, was exactly the opposite. He had a deeply slow, entirely foggy mind, and he struggled immensely just to remember a single, simple, short stanza of basic teaching. He would practice diligently, all through the long, quiet night, repeating the words over and over, but by the time the bright morning sun arose, his mind was completely blank, having forgotten every single, precious syllable. His older brother, entirely lacking in gentle patience, and totally blinded by his own quick intelligence, grew incredibly frustrated, and deeply, terribly embarrassed, by his brother's constant, heavy failures. One bright morning, the older brother lost his temper entirely, using words that were incredibly sharp, completely devastating, and totally devoid of any true compassion. He looked at Kulapanthaka with cold, disappointed eyes, and told him that he was utterly useless, that he had absolutely no potential for spiritual growth, and that he should simply pack his meager belongings and leave the sacred monastery forever. Those harsh, heavy, crushing words hit the younger brother's soft heart exactly like a massive, falling boulder, instantly shattering his spirit into 1,000 tiny, irreparable pieces. Kulapanthaka did not argue, he did not defend himself, because he actually, truly believed the cruel, devastating words that his own beloved brother had spoken. He stood completely alone, by the massive, wooden gates of the ancient monastery, weeping bitterly, his small shoulders shaking, totally consumed by a dark, suffocating wave of profound inadequacy and absolute, total despair. He was entirely ready to walk away into the dense, frightening forest, completely abandoning his beautiful, noble dreams, purely because one person had carelessly labeled him as a hopeless, worthless failure. It was exactly in this moment of complete, crushing heartbreak that the fully awakened Buddha happened to be walking near the heavy, wooden gates. He saw the small, weeping monk, and he instantly understood, with his vast, penetrating wisdom, the deep, agonizing wound that those careless words had inflicted. The Buddha did not give a grand, complex lecture about the nature of intelligence, nor did he tell the young man to simply stop crying and try harder. He approached him with a presence so completely gentle, so incredibly warm, that it felt exactly like the soft, comforting embrace of a loving, protective father. The Buddha softly asked the weeping monk why he was standing there, consumed by such deep, bitter sorrow. When Kulapanthaka explained, through his heavy, choking tears, that his brother had called him utterly useless and entirely stupid, the Buddha smiled, a smile of infinite, boundless reassurance. He told the young monk, with a voice that radiated absolute, unshakable certainty, that true wisdom does not belong to those who simply memorize 1,000 empty words, but it belongs entirely to those who clearly see the true, changing nature of the world around them. The Buddha then gave the young monk a brilliantly clean, perfectly white piece of cloth, and gave him one extremely simple, very short instruction. He told him to sit quietly, facing the warm morning sun, to gently rub the white cloth, and to simply repeat the words, taking on dirt, taking on dirt. It was a practice so incredibly simple, that even the slowest, most foggy mind, could easily grasp its profound, clear intention. Kulapanthaka, feeling a massive, sudden surge of beautiful hope, purely because the Buddha believed in him, sat down, and began to mindfully follow the gentle, encouraging instruction. As the hours passed, as he sat in the heat, continuously rubbing the soft fabric, the sweat and the dust from his own hands slowly turned the brilliant, pure white cloth into a dark, soiled, dirty rag. In that exact, quiet, beautiful moment of observation, a massive, brilliant flash of profound realization, completely illuminated his previously dark, foggy mind. He suddenly understood, exactly, and entirely, how the pure, bright mind becomes stained by the dark dirt of greed, anger, and deep delusion. The heavy, dark fog of ignorance, completely lifted, and Kula Panthaka, the monk who was called entirely stupid, achieved the ultimate, highest state of pure, absolute enlightenment. This magnificent, towering story beautifully demonstrates the absolute, terrifying contrast between words that destroy and words that profoundly heal. The older brother, using words of sharp judgment and heavy impatience, nearly pushed a beautiful soul entirely off the edge of a dark, lonely cliff. But the Buddha, using words of gentle encouragement, deep validation, and profound, creative skillful means, completely saved that exact same soul, guiding him toward the highest, most beautiful freedom a human being can possibly experience. We are constantly playing both of these roles, friends, in the bustling, daily theater of our own complex lives. When someone in your family, or someone in your quiet circle of friends, is struggling deeply to understand a new concept, or failing repeatedly at a difficult task, what kind of words do you naturally choose to offer? Do you sigh heavily, rolling your eyes, and use words that subtly, or overtly, label them as incompetent, slow, or totally hopeless? Or do you take a gentle step back, find a completely new, creative angle, and use words that build a sturdy, reliable bridge over their dark, swirling river of confusion? The difference between completely breaking someone's spirit and entirely unlocking their hidden genius often comes down to one, single, carefully chosen sentence. It is particularly crucial to deeply examine the words that we pass down, entirely unconsciously, through the long, complex generations of our own families. Many of us carry deep, invisible scars, inflicted by the sharp, impatient words of our own parents or our tired grandparents, who were often battling their own massive, unspoken traumas. They may have used harsh, comparing words, constantly asking why we were not as smart, or as fast, or as perfectly obedient as someone else. These deeply ingrained, painful words can easily become our own toxic habit, and without even realizing it, we might start saying the exact same painful things to the next innocent generation. But you have the immense, magnificent power, right here and right now, to completely stop that dark, heavy train of generational verbal trauma directly in its rusty tracks. You can consciously choose to be the one beautiful link in your long family chain that completely refuses to pass down the toxic poison of harsh, unthinking criticism. You can choose to look at a child who has just spilled a massive cup of milk, and instead of shouting in blind anger, you can speak gently, explaining that mistakes are simply tiny, necessary steps on the beautiful road to learning how to walk gracefully in this heavy, clumsy world. There is a profound, quiet beauty in the simple, everyday act of speaking words of genuine, heartfelt appreciation to the people we have known for many long years. Over time, in any long relationship, whether it is a marriage, a deep friendship, or a close partnership, we naturally tend to take the other person entirely for granted. We stop saying the beautiful, sparkling things that we said in the very beginning, and we replace those loving words with functional, completely dry conversations about paying the bills, doing the laundry, and managing the endless, boring logistics of modern daily survival. But the human heart, friends, is exactly like a delicate, beautiful houseplant. It constantly needs the pure, clean water, of verbal affection, to stay vibrant, green, and completely alive. If you stop watering a plant, it will slowly, quietly dry up, its leaves turning brown, and eventually, it will wither away into dust, without making a single, loud sound. Relationships die in the exact same, quiet, heartbreaking manner, when the soft, gentle words of love, and deep appreciation, simply dry up, and disappear from the daily atmosphere. You do not need grand, sweeping, expensive gestures, to keep love vibrantly alive, you only need to consciously, and consistently, speak the truth, of your quiet affection. Imagine looking at your partner, on a completely ordinary, totally mundane Tuesday evening, and simply saying, with a voice full of genuine, profound warmth, that you deeply appreciate the quiet, steady way they always support you. Imagine looking at your aging parents and telling them, exactly and clearly, how much you value the immense, invisible sacrifices they made for your happiness all those many years ago. These simple, beautifully spoken words act exactly like a powerful, glowing magic, instantly dissolving years of quiet resentment, and completely renewing the deep, precious bonds that hold our fragile lives together. Even in the difficult, necessary moments of deep conflict, when we simply must address a serious, painful problem, we can absolutely choose to use words that heal, rather than words that completely destroy. The ancient teachings offer a beautiful, clear framework for this difficult practice, encouraging us to speak the absolute truth, but to speak it gently, to speak it at the correct, perfect time, and to ensure that it is entirely rooted in a deep desire to benefit the other person. If we need to correct a friend, we should not do it in a loud, crowded room, where our sharp words will cause massive, burning humiliation. Instead, we should invite them to a quiet, private space, and speak softly, focusing entirely on the specific, problematic action, rather than completely attacking their core, essential character. Saying that a specific decision was deeply unhelpful is vastly and completely different than loudly saying that the person themselves is entirely foolish or completely worthless. When we protect the dignity of the person we are correcting, when we wrap our necessary, difficult truth in a soft, thick blanket of genuine, caring respect, they are 1,000 times more likely to actually hear our message and gracefully change their path. There was a highly revered, incredibly wise elder monk living deep in the lush, quiet forests, who had a young, highly rebellious, and completely restless disciple. This young monk constantly broke the minor, quiet rules of the monastery, leaving his robes messy, speaking loudly during the silent meditation hours, and sneaking small, forbidden snacks, late in the dark night. The other monks, deeply annoyed, and completely frustrated, constantly demanded that the wise elder harshly punish the boy or completely throw him out into the wild, unforgiving jungle. But the wise elder simply smiled softly, and never raised his gentle voice, continuing to treat the young, messy disciple with absolute, unwavering, profound kindness. One evening, the other monks, completely fed up, gathered together, and loudly complained, telling the elder that his constant, gentle words were entirely useless, and that the boy was taking total advantage of his deep, blind compassion. The elder listened quietly, and then spoke, his voice carrying the deep, profound weight of a massive, ancient mountain. He gently explained that a perfectly healthy person does not urgently need a doctor, but it is exactly the sick, deeply confused person who absolutely requires the most patient, healing care. He told them that if you were to use harsh, punishing words, and cast the boy out, the young disciple would only grow more bitter, more angry, and more completely lost in the dark, heavy world. By choosing to speak only words of patient, completely unconditional love, the elder was slowly, invisibly, planting deep, powerful seeds in the young boy's wild, restless heart. Years later, that exact same, rebellious young monk, completely transformed his life, becoming one of the most gentle, deeply respected, and highly compassionate teachers in the entire region, all because one person completely refused to give up on him, and refused to use words of total destruction. This is the long, beautiful, patient game of speaking with true, deep mindfulness, everyone. We might not see the immediate, flashy results of our gentle, encouraging words, and sometimes, people might completely ignore our kindness, or even throw it right back in our weary faces. But every single time, we choose gentleness over harshness, every single time, we choose to offer a word of pure, shining hope, instead of a word of dark, heavy despair, we are actively participating in the profound, massive healing of the entire universe. We are literally shifting the vibration of the entire world, one tiny, quiet, beautifully spoken sentence, at a totally perfect time. When we find ourselves completely overwhelmed by the noise, the anger, and the constant, bitter arguments that seem to totally dominate our modern, digital society, we must remember the profound, unshakable power of our own, individual voice. We do not have to join the loud, angry chorus of shouting critics, and we do not have to participate in the endless, completely useless tearing down of our fellow human beings. We can absolutely choose to be a quiet, steady, reliable voice of reason, a beautiful, clear beacon of deep empathy, and a solid, unshakable sanctuary of peace for everyone who is fortunate enough to cross our daily path. Let us carry this deep, profound awareness into every single conversation we have, starting from this very precise moment forward. Let us look deeply into the tired, beautiful eyes of the people we meet and actively search for the good, the noble, and the purely radiant light that exists within their complex hearts. And when we finally see that light, let us use our precious, beautiful voices to call it out, to name it clearly, and to encourage it to shine even brighter and even stronger. Our words can be the exact, powerful medicine that a weary, broken world so desperately and urgently needs right now. Just think about the spaces where we spend the most time absorbing the language of the people around us. Our minds, friends, are exactly like highly absorbent, incredibly porous sponges, soaking up every single syllable, every single tone, that we are constantly exposed to. If you spend your entire day listening to harsh criticisms, or scrolling through angry, bitter debates, those exact same, heavy vibrations, will slowly seep right into your own vocabulary, without you even noticing the subtle, dark shift. You might wake up one morning, and find yourself using a sharp, cynical tone, toward a beloved family member, completely wondering where that sudden, cold bitterness even came from. Long, long ago, deep within the vast, ancient forests, a massive, terrifying storm swept through the dense canopy, shaking the oldest, most sturdy trees. High up, in a small, fragile nest, two tiny, newborn parrot brothers were suddenly blown away by the fierce, howling winds, separated entirely from their warm, safe home. The harsh winds carried the first tiny bird far across the raging river, dropping him roughly right into the middle of a loud, violent camp filled with dangerous, ruthless bandits. The bandits kept the small bird, raising him amidst their constant shouting, their cruel plotting, and their harsh, heavy, aggressive language. The exact same storm carried the second, tiny brother, in a completely different, gentle direction, dropping him softly onto the blooming, fragrant flowers of a deeply peaceful, quiet hermitage. The serene, gentle sages, who lived there, took the fragile bird in, raising him with immense, tender care. This second bird grew up listening entirely to the soft, rhythmic chanting of ancient texts, the gentle, respectful conversations of the wise elders, and the deep, beautiful sounds of absolute, radiant peace. Years later, a powerful, weary king became hopelessly lost while hunting in that exact same, vast forest. Exhausted, deeply thirsty, and entirely separated from his loyal royal guards, the king stumbled upon the rough, hidden camp of the dangerous bandits. Before he could even ask for a simple drop of water, a loud, harsh, grating voice screeched from the branches above. The king looked up and saw a brightly colored parrot, screaming with absolute, terrifying malice, telling the bandits to attack the stranger, to steal his bright jewels, to bind him tightly, and to show absolutely no mercy. The king, completely terrified by the sheer hatred in the bird's voice, immediately turned, and fled as fast as his tired legs could possibly carry him, running deep into the tangled, dark woods. After running for a long, exhausting time, the king eventually emerged into a beautiful, sunlit clearing, discovering the peaceful, quiet hermitage. As he approached, a different, incredibly soft, highly melodic voice floated gently down from a beautiful, ancient mango tree. It was the second parrot, speaking with profound, elegant grace, welcoming the weary traveler with words of deep, genuine warmth. The bird softly told the king to please sit down in the cooling shade, to drink the sweet, fresh water from the clay pot, and to rest his tired, aching feet, assuring him that he was completely and totally safe. The king, deeply amazed and completely bewildered by this massive, striking contrast, sat down and asked the gentle bird how two creatures of the exact same species could possess such entirely, profoundly different natures. The wise parrot, fluttering down to a lower, closer branch, explained beautifully that they were not just of the same species, but they were actually true blood brothers, born from the exact same warm nest. The parrot explained that his brother was not born evil, but he had simply absorbed the cruel, violent words of the harsh bandits until those dark words became his own only reality. The wise bird then said that he himself had simply absorbed the gentle, compassionate words of the peaceful sages, allowing that soft, beautiful language to shape his entire, loving heart. This ancient, incredibly vivid story perfectly captures the undeniable, immense power of our verbal environment, everyone. The words we allow into our daily lives are the exact same words that will eventually, and inevitably, flow out of our own mouths, shaping our entire, personal destiny. If we want to cultivate a voice of deep, radiant healing, we must first, consciously choose to surround ourselves with voices that are equally kind, profoundly thoughtful, and beautifully uplifting. It is an act of deep, necessary self-care to gently step away from the loud, toxic conversations, and to simply refuse to participate in the endless, heavy cycle of destructive, meaningless chatter. We must become the careful, wise gatekeepers of our own precious minds, friends. When a conversation starts spiraling down into dark, heavy gossip, or cruel, unnecessary judgments, you hold the absolute, beautiful power to change the entire direction of that rushing, muddy river. You can gently, gracefully introduce a much more positive, uplifting topic, or you can simply, and quietly, excuse yourself, choosing the pure, clean air of silence over the heavy, suffocating smog of negative words. By doing this, you are not only protecting your own delicate inner peace, but you are also silently, powerfully teaching others that you only trade in the beautiful, high currency of respect and love. Let us think deeply and honestly about the way we speak about people when they are not physically present in the room with us. It is a very common, highly destructive habit to gather together and casually tear down an absent friend or a distant colleague simply because it feels like a safe, easy way to bond with the people who are right in front of us. But speaking ill of the absent is exactly like throwing dark, invisible poison into the clear, communal well that everyone has to drink from. The people who are listening to you will instantly and subconsciously realize that if you are willing to speak so harshly about someone who is not there, you will absolutely and inevitably speak the exact same way about them the very moment they leave the room. This destroys the fragile, delicate foundation of trust, entirely eroding the beautiful, safe bonds of any genuine community. Instead, imagine the sheer, breathtaking power of speaking beautifully about people behind their backs. Imagine being the person who is known entirely for only spreading rumors of deep, genuine praise, and pointing out the hidden, quiet strengths of the people who are not there to defend themselves. When those positive, glowing words eventually make their way back to the person you were talking about, they will feel a wave of profound, unexpected joy, and an unshakable, deeply rooted loyalty toward your beautiful, noble heart. There was once a quiet, highly observant monk living in a large, bustling ancient community who was known by every single person as the absolute master of positive, uplifting speech. Whenever a group of monks would start complaining about the lazy habits or the annoying quirks of a specific, difficult brother, this quiet monk would listen patiently, and then, he would gently, smoothly highlight one single, incredibly beautiful quality about that exact same, difficult person. If they complained that a brother was always late, he would gently point out that the brother was also the one who stayed up the latest, quietly cleaning the massive, dirty kitchen for everyone else. He never argued loudly, he never scolded the complainers, he simply, and consistently, dropped heavy, beautiful anchors of truth that completely grounded the floating, toxic negativity. Over time, the entire, massive community began to change, realizing that speaking ill simply could not survive in the bright, clear light of his consistent, gentle praise. He single-handedly, completely transformed a tense, complaining environment into a sanctuary of deep, mutual respect, solely by choosing to be the one, reliable voice of absolute, unwavering kindness. This exact same, beautiful opportunity is waiting for you, in your own, busy office, in your own, complex family, and in your own, daily social circles. You can be the one who completely stops the heavy, rolling snowball of cruel gossip directly in its cold tracks, simply by offering a warm, genuine compliment about the person being targeted. It requires absolutely no money, it requires no special, elite training, it only requires a brave, completely open heart and a tongue that is deeply committed to the profound, ancient practice of doing absolutely no harm. Consider the profound, delicate moments, when someone you deeply care about falls terribly, physically ill, or is facing a massive, terrifying life crisis. In these highly vulnerable, completely raw moments, the human spirit is exactly like a fragile, beautiful piece of glass, waiting to be handled. When we visit the sick, or the deeply grieving, we often feel completely awkward, entirely unsure of what to say, and we end up offering empty, hollow clichés that do absolutely nothing to ease their heavy, crushing burden. We might say things like, "Everything happens for a completely mysterious reason," or, "You just need to stay strong," completely failing to realize that these words can actually make them feel incredibly isolated and deeply misunderstood. The ancient teachings offer a profoundly different, entirely beautiful approach to speaking with the sick and the deeply sorrowful. The most powerful, healing words you can ever offer, in a moment of profound, dark crisis, are often just the simple, deeply honest words of absolute presence. Simply saying, "I am here for you, I deeply see how much this hurts, and you do not have to carry this heavy, terrifying burden alone," can provide more genuine, lasting comfort than 1,000 perfectly polished, philosophical lectures. It is the deep, vibrating tone of your voice, the soft, genuine sincerity in your eyes, and the quiet, unshakable stability of your physical presence that actually does the profound, miraculous healing. There is a beautiful, highly moving record of the Buddha himself visiting a monk who was suffering from a terrible, highly contagious, and deeply foul-smelling disease. All the other monks, completely overwhelmed by the terrible smell and the horrific, frightening appearance of the sickness, had entirely abandoned the poor man, leaving him to suffer, in absolute, terrifying loneliness, in a dark, dirty corner. When the Buddha discovered this, he did not offer a long, complicated sermon about the deep, karmic reasons for the man's terrible illness, nor did he simply stand far away, shouting empty words of encouragement. He walked directly into the dark, foul-smelling room, he called for warm, clean water, and with his own, gentle, royal hands, he carefully, and tenderly, washed the sick man's broken, suffering body. As he washed him, he spoke words of such deep, profound, absolute tenderness, completely validating the man's intense pain, and offering a beautiful, radiant sense of spiritual safety. Those gentle, softly spoken words, combined with the profound, humble action of pure love, completely relieved the dying monk's agonizing, mental terror, allowing him to pass away, in a state of absolute, luminous, unshakable peace. This incredible, deeply humbling story teaches us that our words must always be deeply and completely aligned with our genuine, physical actions, friends. If we speak beautiful, glowing words of love, but our actions are cold, completely distant, and deeply selfish, our words become exactly like empty, hollow shells, crashing loudly onto a cold, hard beach, containing absolutely no real, nourishing substance. But when our soft, encouraging words are perfectly matched by the quiet, steady actions of our caring hands, we become true, walking miracles, capable of pulling people out of the deepest, darkest trenches of human suffering. We must also deeply consider the profound, lasting impact of the very last words we speak to someone before they leave our presence. Every single time you say goodbye to a loved one, exactly as they walk out the heavy, wooden door, you are handing them a small, invisible, emotional package that they will carry with them for the rest of their entire day. If that final package is filled with a sharp, heavy argument, a bitter, unresolved complaint, or a cold, completely dismissive tone, they will walk out into the busy, dangerous world, carrying a heavy, bleeding wound in their tender heart. But, if you make it a deeply ingrained, beautiful habit, to ensure that your very last words, to anyone, are always words of deep, genuine affection, words of warm encouragement, or a simple, highly sincere wish for their absolute safety, you are handing them a powerful, glowing shield. You are wrapping them in an invisible, protective armor of love that will deeply and continuously comfort them, no matter what difficult, terrifying challenges they might suddenly face in the unpredictable, chaotic world outside. Let us make a quiet, unshakable vow to never let the sun set on a harsh, angry word, and to never let a loved one walk away from us without hearing exactly and clearly how deeply and profoundly they are valued and cherished. In the vast, endless ocean of time, the words we speak today will ripple outward, far beyond the short, fragile span of our own limited physical lives. The gentle, encouraging words you speak to a small, frightened child today might become the exact, powerful mantra that they repeat to themselves 50 long years from now, when they are facing a massive, terrifying obstacle. You are literally, actively shaping the future, building the emotional architecture of the coming generations, entirely through the specific, deliberate choices you make with your precious, beautiful voice, right in this very, exact moment. Let us deeply honor this immense, terrifying, and profoundly beautiful responsibility by choosing to slow down, to breathe deeply, and to speak only when our words are truly an improvement upon the beautiful, vast, profound silence. When we do speak, let our voices ring with the crystal clear, beautiful clarity of absolute truth, entirely softened by the warm, golden light of unconditional, boundless compassion. This is the true, noble path of the awakened heart, a path where every single sentence becomes a beautiful, fragrant lotus flower, gently offered to a heavy, suffering world, bringing profound, lasting relief, and deep, unshakable joy to every single ear that is fortunate enough to hear it. Imagine a beautiful, sprawling garden where every single plant represents a conversation that you have had throughout your entire, complex life. Are you looking at a dark, tangled patch of sharp, poisonous thorns, representing the angry, careless, and deeply hurtful things you have said in moments of blind, foolish rage? Or are you gazing upon a magnificent, vibrant, blooming orchard, filled with sweet, nourishing fruits and bright, colorful blossoms, representing the thousands of times you chose to offer praise, to offer gentle comfort, and to speak deep, healing truths? The beautiful, profound truth is that no matter what your garden looks like right now, no matter how many sharp, painful thorns you might have accidentally planted in the past, you always have the absolute, immediate power to start planting brand new, glowing seeds of loving kindness, right here and right now. Every new breath is a fresh, beautiful opportunity to completely change the entire landscape of your verbal world. You can start by simply looking at the person sitting right next to you and offering them a word of such deep, pure, unexpected warmth that it completely melts away their hidden, silent anxieties. The universe, in all its vast, ancient wisdom, is constantly listening to the delicate, powerful frequency of your daily speech, waiting for you to harmonize with the profound, beautiful rhythm of genuine love. There was once a very wealthy, highly successful merchant who traveled across massive, unforgiving deserts, carrying rare, incredibly valuable silks and precious, glittering jewels. He was a man of sharp, quick business, always calculating, always demanding the best, and entirely used to speaking, with a heavy, commanding, deeply authoritative voice. One day, during a particularly brutal, exhausting journey, his massive caravan completely ran out of fresh, drinking water, and the scorching, relentless sun began to drain the life from his tired, frightened workers. The merchant, entirely driven by his own rising panic, and completely lacking in any genuine compassion, began to scream loudly at the fallen men, demanding that they rise immediately. He used his heavy, commanding tone, the exact same voice that he always used to bully his competitors in the busy, crowded marketplaces, entirely expecting that his loud anger would magically create water or sudden strength. He called the men lazy, he called them entirely worthless, and he threatened to withhold all their pay if they did not stand up and pull the heavy, massive carts. But his harsh, violent words fell onto the dry, burning sand, producing absolutely no positive effect whatsoever. The men were not lazy, friends, they were simply broken, completely drained of their physical life force, and the merchant's cruel words only pushed them deeper into a dark, suffocating pit of absolute despair, making them truly believe that they were going to die, right there, under the scorching, relentless sun. Suddenly, an old, highly experienced, and deeply quiet desert guide, who had traveled these burning sands for many long decades, stepped forward, completely ignoring the screaming, frantic merchant. The old guide did not yell, he did not offer any harsh threats, and he certainly did not use a single, demeaning word to address the fallen, weeping men. Instead, he knelt down slowly, directly onto the burning sand, sitting right next to the most exhausted, frightened young worker, and he began to speak, with a voice that was incredibly soft, deeply rhythmic, and completely full of unshakable, profound hope. He spoke of a hidden, cool, beautiful oasis that he knew existed just over the next, massive sand dune, describing the sweet, clear water, and the dark, refreshing shade of the towering, ancient palm trees. The old guide's words, spoken with such deep, unwavering certainty, and absolute, genuine care, acted exactly like a cool, refreshing breeze, blowing directly through the suffocating, heavy heat. He gently placed his hand on the young worker's shaking shoulder, softly praising the boy's immense courage, reminding him of his loving family, waiting safely at home, and slowly, beautifully singing an ancient, comforting song of the vast desert. Hearing these beautiful, encouraging words, the young worker felt a sudden, miraculous surge of entirely new, unexpected energy, flowing right back into his tired, heavy limbs. One by one, listening to the soft, rhythmic, deeply caring voice of the wise old guide, the broken men began to slowly stand up, finding a hidden reserve of immense physical strength that the angry, screaming merchant could never possibly unlock. They walked together, guided entirely by the soft, encouraging words, and just as the old man had promised, they found the beautiful, hidden oasis, saving their own precious lives and the life of the arrogant merchant, as well. The wealthy merchant, sitting by the cool, clear water, felt a deep, overwhelming sense of profound shame, completely realizing that his loud, commanding authority was utterly useless in the face of true hardship. He learned, on that extremely difficult, burning day, that gentle, inspiring words, woven with genuine, heartfelt compassion, possess a raw, undeniable power that can literally raise people from the very edge of dark, creeping death. This beautiful story, everyone, paints a vivid, incredibly clear picture of the very real, physiological impact that our spoken language has on the physical human body. When you use words of heavy threat, causing deep fear, or absolute panic, the human body physically reacts, shutting down its vital energy, and entering a state of complete, terrifying paralysis. But when you use words of profound validation, words of deep, unshakable hope, and genuine, warm encouragement, the listener's body physically relaxes, their breathing slows down, and their mind suddenly opens up to brilliant, unexpected possibilities. You are literally altering their physical chemistry, friends, every single time you choose to offer a gentle, supportive sentence, rather than a sharp, critical demand. We see this exact dynamic playing out every single day, in modern hospitals, in busy schools, and directly inside our own, quiet homes. Think about the incredible, life-altering story of a woman named Patakara, whose tragic, deeply heartbreaking journey is recorded in the ancient, sacred texts. Patakara experienced a level of suffering that is almost entirely and completely impossible for any normal human mind to possibly comprehend, losing her entire, beautiful family in a matter of a few, dark, terrifying days. She lost her beloved husband to a venomous snakebite. She watched helplessly as a massive bird carried away her newborn infant. She saw her older child swept away by a raging, violent river, and she finally learned that her own parents and brother were crushed to death in a sudden, collapsing building. The sheer, crushing weight of this massive, unimaginable grief completely broke her fragile mind, sending her into a state of absolute, raving madness. Patakara lost all sense of reality, tearing off her clothes, running completely naked, and wildly screaming through the busy, crowded streets of the ancient city, entirely consumed by her own dark, agonizing sorrow. The people in the city, failing to understand her deep, profound pain, reacted with cruel, harsh words, calling her a crazy woman, throwing dirt, and tossing hard, sharp stones at her, simply trying to chase her away, like a stray, dangerous animal. Their cruel, unfeeling words, and their violent actions, only deepened her terrible madness, making her feel completely, and totally hunted, in a world that had already taken absolutely everything from her bleeding heart. But one day, her frantic, wild running led her directly into the peaceful, quiet grove, where the fully awakened Buddha was calmly teaching a large, silent assembly. When the crowd saw the screaming, naked woman approaching, they began to shout harsh warnings, telling her to stay away, and yelling cruel, dismissive insults, trying to protect the serene, holy space. The Buddha, however, raised his gentle hand, stopping the loud, angry crowd, and he looked directly at the broken, wild woman, with eyes that held the depth of a million quiet, compassionate oceans. He did not judge her appearance, he did not scold her loud screaming, and he absolutely did not demand that she suddenly calm down, or act completely normal. Instead, the Buddha spoke exactly one, short, profoundly powerful sentence, allowing his voice to carry the full, healing weight of absolute, pure love. He softly said, "Sister, recover your presence of mind." Those incredibly simple, deeply respectful words, spoken with such absolute, unwavering gentle authority, penetrated straight through the thick, heavy fog of her terrifying, absolute madness. Hearing herself called sister, hearing a voice that offered pure, unshakable safety, rather than violent, harsh judgment, Patakara suddenly stopped running, her wild, screaming completely ceasing, as if a massive, heavy spell had been instantly broken. She looked down, suddenly realizing her bare, physical state, and she immediately sank to the ground, a deep, profound sense of clear reality, washing over her tired, broken mind. Someone gently offered her a cloak, and she sat down weeping, not the wild, crazy tears of absolute madness, but the soft, healing tears of a person who has finally, and completely, been truly seen, and deeply understood. The Buddha then continued to speak, using words of immense, comforting wisdom, explaining the universal, unavoidable nature of deep loss, and completely guiding her toward a path of absolute, lasting inner peace. Pattakara eventually became one of the most highly respected, deeply wise teachers, helping countless other grieving women, entirely because one single person used a few perfect words to save her life. This beautiful, towering example shows us exactly how we should approach those who are drowning in the dark, heavy waters of extreme, unpredictable grief. When someone loses a loved one, or experiences a massive, devastating life failure, society often rushes in, with a flood of completely useless, and sometimes deeply hurtful, empty advice. People will say things like, "Time heals all wounds," or, "You need to be strong for your children," completely failing to realize that these words actually sound exactly like harsh, demanding orders to a person who is entirely and completely broken. Telling someone who is drowning to simply swim harder is not helpful, friends. It is actually a form of deep, unintentional cruelty, born out of our own nervous discomfort with their heavy pain. Instead, we must learn the beautiful, quiet art of speaking like the Buddha spoke to Pattakara, offering words that simply anchor the person directly in the present moment, without demanding any change. Saying a simple, deeply heartfelt sentence, like, "I am so deeply sorry for your immense pain, and I am sitting right here with you," offers exactly that same, beautiful, life-saving safety. You do not need to fix their massive tragedy, because grief is not a broken machine that needs repairing. It is a deep, profound wound that requires the gentle, patient ointment of your loving, quiet presence. There is another, completely astonishing story, from the ancient days, that perfectly demonstrates the power of words to stop sudden, extreme, physical violence, right in its very tracks. There was a terrifying, highly dangerous man named Angulimala, who had become a ruthless, completely merciless serial killer, terrorizing the dark, lonely roads, cutting off the fingers of his victims, to wear as a horrific, bloody necklace. The entire country lived in absolute, paralyzing fear. Entire villages were completely abandoned, and even the heavily armed, royal soldiers, were deeply terrified to enter the dark forest, where this massive, violent man lived. Angulimala was completely lost, deeply drowning in a sea of absolute, dark delusion, believing that his violent, horrific path was somehow the correct, necessary way to achieve ultimate knowledge. One bright, clear morning, the Buddha, completely ignoring the frantic, terrified warnings of the local villagers, walked calmly and silently straight into the dark, dangerous forest, directly toward the known territory of the ruthless killer. Angulimala, seeing this lone, peaceful monk approaching, felt a sudden burst of violent, angry energy, drawing his heavy, sharp sword, and sprinting at full speed, entirely ready to claim his next, bloody victim. But a very strange, completely unexplainable thing happened, friends. No matter how incredibly fast Angulimala ran, sprinting with all his massive strength, he simply could not catch up to the calmly walking, entirely peaceful Buddha. Completely exhausted, deeply confused, and panting heavily, the violent killer finally shouted, with a loud, aggressive, demanding voice, "Stop, monk, stop right there. The Buddha did not turn around in fear, he did not run away, and he did not draw any hidden weapon. He simply continued his slow, beautiful walk, and spoke over his shoulder, with a voice that was as calm, clear, and unshakable as a massive, ancient mountain. The Buddha gently said, "I have already stopped, Angulimala, it is you, who have not stopped." This entirely unexpected, deeply confusing reply, completely shattered Angulimala's normal, violent reality. He stopped running, lowering his heavy sword, and demanded to know what this strange, confusing monk meant, accusing him of lying, since the monk was clearly still walking. The Buddha then turned around, looking directly into the dark, tormented eyes of the killer, and spoke words of absolute, brilliant truth, explaining that he had completely, and entirely stopped, all violence toward any living being. He told Angulimala, that it was the killer himself, who was constantly running, endlessly chasing his own dark anger, and completely failing, to stop his horrific, destructive harm. Those simple, profoundly beautiful words, hit the violent killer exactly like a massive, brilliant flash of lightning, instantly illuminating the absolute darkness of his deeply confused mind. He suddenly saw the immense, terrible pain he had caused, he felt the heavy, crushing weight of his own, horrific actions, and the sharp sword, simply fell from his trembling hands, clattering loudly against the hard, rocky ground. Angulimala fell to his knees, weeping deeply, and immediately begged to be completely accepted into the peaceful, gentle path of truth, leaving his dark, violent life entirely behind, in a single, miraculous moment. We can completely apply this exact, profound wisdom to the modern conflicts that happen entirely within our own walls and our own daily relationships. When someone approaches you with loud, aggressive anger, completely ready to start a bitter, heavy argument, they are exactly like Angulimala, running wildly, with their emotional sword drawn. If you yell back, telling them to stop shouting, or if you immediately defend yourself with sharp, angry words, you are simply adding your own speed to their wild, violent chase. You get caught directly in the terrible, exhausting race of completely matching their dark, aggressive energy, and the argument simply escalates into a massive, damaging explosion. But if you can master the beautiful, profound art of completely stopping yourself first, you can use your voice to disarm their entire attack. When they shout, you can remain completely, beautifully calm, keeping your voice incredibly soft, and simply saying, "I can clearly see that you are deeply upset, but I am not going to fight with you, I am choosing to listen." By entirely refusing to match their aggressive tone, and by using words that express absolute, unshakable peace, you literally pull the emotional ground right out from under their angry feet. They will suddenly realize that they are shouting loudly at a calm, peaceful mountain, and their own, aggressive energy, will slowly, but surely, begin to completely dissolve, fading away into nothingness. It takes immense, profound courage to offer gentle words, when your entire body is screaming to react with defensive, burning anger, everyone. It is exactly like training a wild, powerful horse, you must constantly pull back on the heavy reins of your own reactions, consciously choosing to guide the conversation toward the beautiful, calm waters of understanding. This profound practice is not a sign of weakness or absolute surrender, it is the ultimate, highest form of self-mastery, proving that you are completely in charge of your own internal weather, regardless of the terrible storms raging violently outside. Let us also deeply consider the incredible, completely overlooked power of speaking words of pure, genuine joy, completely celebrating the successes of the people around us. In our modern, highly competitive world, jealousy and quiet envy often silently infect our minds, making it incredibly difficult to offer true, happy praise when a friend or colleague achieves something truly magnificent. We might offer a half-hearted, completely forced congratulations, but deeply inside, we are secretly wishing that it had been us who received the grand promotion or the beautiful, exciting news. But the ancient teachings speak of a beautiful, radiant quality, known as sympathetic joy, which is the absolute, pure ability to feel complete, genuine happiness for the good fortune of another. When you can look at a friend, completely letting go of your own ego, and say, with a bright, ringing, entirely sincere voice, "I am so incredibly proud of you, you absolutely deserve this beautiful success," you create a massive, golden wave of positive energy. You not only elevate their immense joy, but you completely purify your own heart, entirely washing away the dark, toxic stains of bitter jealousy and deep, quiet resentment. Words of pure, unselfish celebration act exactly like a powerful, magnetic force, drawing even more beautiful, joyful experiences directly into your own precious life. When you speak beautifully of success, you become a natural, glowing beacon for it, completely opening your arms to the vast, generous abundance of the entire universe. But when you speak with sharp, hidden envy or constantly diminish the achievements of others, using sarcastic, cutting words, you literally build a high, thick wall, completely blocking any beautiful, new blessings from entering your own, quiet space. There was a lovely, deeply heartwarming story about a very poor, struggling farmer who lived right next door to a highly successful, incredibly wealthy landowner. The wealthy landowner's fields always produced massive, overflowing harvests, while the poor farmer's tiny patch of land barely yielded enough to feed his own small family. However, the poor farmer possessed a heart of pure, absolute gold, and every single harvest season, he would lean over the wooden fence and shout words of immense, joyful praise, completely celebrating his neighbor's massive, towering success. He never once asked for a single coin, he never complained about his own, very real poverty, he simply loved to use his voice to express absolute, genuine happiness for the beauty of the vast, golden fields. The wealthy landowner, who was completely used to dealing with greedy, deeply jealous people, was incredibly touched by the sheer, unfiltered purity of the poor farmer's constant, joyful words. One bright spring day, without any warning, the wealthy man simply gifted a massive, incredibly fertile portion of his own land directly to the poor farmer, completely changing his life forever. The wealthy man explained that out of all the people he knew, the poor farmer was the only one who truly understood the beauty of the harvest, because he knew exactly how to speak of it with a clean, unselfish heart. This completely true, beautiful dynamic is always at play, friends, constantly rewarding those who use their voices to spread pure, unconditional light. When you celebrate others loudly, the world will eventually, and absolutely, find a beautiful, unexpected way to loudly celebrate you. We must become incredibly mindful of the completely casual, daily complaints that slip so easily, directly through our lips, every single day. We complain about the long, slow lines at the busy grocery store, we complain about the slightly cold food at the quiet restaurant, and we complain about the totally normal, heavy rain, entirely failing to realize how much dark, negative energy we are constantly projecting. Every single complaint is exactly like adding a tiny, heavy drop of dark ink into a clear, beautiful glass of pure water. One drop might not seem to matter, but if you complain all day long, your entire, emotional glass, becomes completely black, entirely obscuring your ability to see any light at all. Instead of constantly voicing our minor, passing frustrations, we can consciously choose to use our words to simply point out the small, hidden miracles that are happening all around us. You can absolutely choose to look out the window on a dark, stormy day, and instead of complaining about the wet, muddy streets, you can use a bright, cheerful voice to praise the beautiful, deep green color of the revived trees. By actively shifting your spoken words from completely useless complaints to tiny, beautiful observations of quiet gratitude, you literally rewire your entire brain, forcing it to constantly search for the hidden, beautiful good in every single situation. Imagine walking into your busy, chaotic home after a long, deeply exhausting day at work, and instead of immediately pointing out the messy shoes or the loud, chaotic noise, you completely pause, taking a deep, centering breath. You smile warmly, and use a soft, entirely joyful voice, to simply say, "It is so incredibly wonderful to finally be home with all of you." That one, beautiful, consciously chosen sentence, entirely changes the trajectory of the whole evening, instantly dissolving the built-up tension, and entirely replacing it with a soft, glowing blanket of peace. Our words are the very foundation, the literal, invisible bricks, of the reality we choose to inhabit, friends. We can build dark, heavy prisons of resentment, entirely constructed with the sharp bricks of criticism, and the cold mortar of endless complaining, or we can build magnificent, towering temples of joy, using the bright, shining bricks of genuine praise, and the warm, golden mortar of pure gratitude. The incredible, profound beauty of this choice, is that it requires no money, no grand permission, and absolutely no special tools. It simply requires your own, mindful, beautifully aware presence. Every time you open your mouth, you hold the power of life, and the power of destruction, resting gently against your teeth. Let us promise to always be the builders of bright temples, completely refusing to lay a single, dark brick of unnecessary pain. Let us speak exactly like the wise, old desert guide, offering cool, refreshing water to the exhausted travelers of this complex world, simply by sharing the profound, beautiful grace of a truly loving, completely compassionate voice. The profound, beautiful grace of a truly loving, completely compassionate voice is not just a precious gift that we offer to the weary strangers walking along our unpredictable path. We must also, and perhaps most importantly, learn to direct that exact same, gentle frequency, deep inward, toward our own, tired, beautifully struggling souls. Think about the quiet, silent moments, just before you fall asleep, in the dark, still night. That is the exact time, when the outside world completely fades away, and your own, internal voice, becomes the absolute loudest, echoing deeply, inside the quiet chambers, of your mind. For so many of us, that inner voice, is incredibly harsh, constantly replaying the tiny, awkward mistakes of the day, magnifying our small flaws, and whispering heavy, dark words, of deep inadequacy. If we truly want to heal the world, friends, we absolutely must start by entirely changing the way we speak to ourselves in those vulnerable, completely hidden moments. You cannot possibly pour fresh, clean water for a thirsty traveler if your own internal well is completely filled with the dark mud of harsh self-criticism. When you notice that inner voice becoming cold, completely rigid, and deeply punishing, you must intentionally and gently interrupt it. You can simply place a warm hand directly over your own beating heart, take a slow, deep breath, and whisper words of genuine, profound forgiveness, directly to yourself. You can gently say that you are doing the absolute best you can, in a very complex, heavy world, and that you are deeply, and entirely, worthy of love, exactly as you are, in this very moment. There is an incredible, highly dramatic record, from the ancient, bustling city of Rajagaha, that perfectly shows how a gentle, loving voice can completely subdue the most terrifying, uncontrolled rage. In those ancient days, there was a monk named Devdatta, whose heart had become completely consumed by dark, heavy jealousy toward the peaceful, widely loved Buddha. Devdatta, entirely blinded by his own toxic ambition, devised a horrific, deeply cruel plan. He went to the royal elephant stables, and intentionally fed massive amounts of strong, burning liquor to a giant, highly aggressive elephant, named Nalajirai. When the massive creature was completely drunk, wildly enraged, and totally out of control, Devdatta unleashed him, directly into the narrow, crowded streets, exactly where the Buddha was calmly walking. The scene was one of absolute, terrifying chaos, everyone. The giant elephant charged blindly, smashing heavy wooden carts into splinters, tearing down small buildings, and trumpeting with a loud, deafening, terrifying roar. The people in the street panicked completely, screaming loudly, pushing each other out of the way, and running frantically, for their precious lives. The loud, chaotic screams of the terrified crowd only made the giant animal even more confused, and deeply, violently angry. The royal guards, heavily armed with sharp spears, were completely paralyzed by fear, totally unable to stop the massive, raging destruction that was rushing directly toward the peaceful, quiet group of monks. But the fully awakened Buddha did not run, he did not show a single, tiny trace of rushing panic, and he did not use any grand, flashing magic to completely destroy the dangerous beast. Instead, he simply stood completely still, radiating a massive, invisible, cooling wave of absolute, boundless loving kindness. As the towering, enraged elephant charged closer, kicking up huge, blinding clouds of thick dust, the Buddha simply opened his mouth and spoke. He did not shout commands, he did not scream in fear, but his voice rang out with a deep, resonant, impossibly beautiful clarity that completely cut through the loud, deafening noise of the panicked crowd. The Buddha spoke directly to the massive, raging animal, using words of such profound, cooling tenderness, exactly like a gentle mother, singing a soft, sweet lullaby to a crying child. He softly told Nalajirai to let go of the burning anger, assuring the giant creature that there was absolutely no danger here, and wrapping his words in a blanket of absolute, pure, unconditional safety. Hearing that incredibly soft, deeply rhythmic, completely fearless voice, the drunk, raging elephant suddenly stopped his terrifying charge, right in his heavy tracks. The massive, wild anger completely melted away from his dark eyes, entirely replaced by a sudden, profound, deeply moving sense of absolute calm. The giant elephant, who moments before was ready to crush everything in his path, slowly lowered his massive head, bent his thick, heavy knees, and gently bowed down, completely peacefully, right at the feet of the serenely smiling Buddha. The entire, chaotic city street fell into a state of absolute, stunned silence, completely amazed by the sheer, undeniable miracle they had just witnessed. It was not a miracle of force, friends, it was the ultimate, supreme miracle of a truly gentle voice, entirely rooted in the unshakable power of deep, genuine love. This ancient, breathtaking story teaches us that no matter how wild, how drunk with anger, or how terrifying a situation might seem, a voice of pure, grounded compassion can completely neutralize the darkest, heaviest rage. We often face our own, personal versions of the raging elephant in our modern, daily lives. Sometimes it is a deeply angry customer, shouting loudly over the phone. Sometimes it is a frustrated teenager, slamming doors and screaming, and sometimes it is our own, internal panic, charging wildly through our exhausted minds. In these exact, high-pressure moments, the absolute worst thing we can do is to add more loud noise, more sharp screams, and more aggressive words to the chaotic storm. We must remember the quiet, unshakable stance of the Buddha, completely refusing to match the violent energy, and choosing instead to project a voice of profound, cooling, absolute safety. Let us also deeply explore the beautiful, quiet art of looking entirely beyond the surface of the words people use to gently understand the true, hidden intention, completely resting beneath them. There was a young, very poor, teenage girl, living in the small, dusty town of Alavi, who worked long, exhausting hours, as a humble weaver. She had listened to the Buddha speak, many years before, and she had taken his gentle, profound instructions, about mindful awareness, deeply into her own, quiet heart, practicing silently, while she worked her heavy, wooden loom. One day, the Buddha returned to her town, and a massive, excited crowd gathered, waiting completely silently, for him to begin his beautiful teaching. But the Buddha sat completely still, completely silent, simply waiting. The young weaver girl, entirely covered in dust, and rushing from her heavy work, finally arrived, walking directly to the front of the massive assembly. The Buddha looked at her, with a warm, encouraging smile, and gently asked her a series of 4, seemingly very simple, basic questions. He first asked her where she had come from. The young girl, looking back with absolute, clear respect, simply answered that she did not know. The massive crowd immediately began to murmur, feeling completely shocked and deeply offended, believing that this poor, dirty girl was speaking with terrible, arrogant disrespect. The Buddha then gently asked her where she was going. Again, the young girl answered calmly, saying that she did not know. The crowd grew even more agitated, whispering harsh, angry words, completely ready to throw her out, for entirely wasting the precious time of the great teacher. The Buddha smiled even more warmly, and asked his third question, asking if she truly did not know. The girl replied, with absolute, unshakable certainty, saying that yes, she absolutely did know. Finally, the Buddha asked his fourth, gentle question, asking her if she knew. The young girl looked deeply into his peaceful eyes, and answered softly, saying that no, she did not know. The crowd was completely furious, totally unable to understand this strange, seemingly nonsensical, highly disrespectful conversation. They were judging her entirely, based on the shallow, surface appearance of her short, confusing words. But the Buddha completely silenced the angry crowd by raising his gentle hand, and he showered the young weaver girl with words of immense, profound, shining praise. He explained to the blind, angry assembly that they were completely failing to hear the deep, radiant truth, beautifully hidden within her short, simple answers. He clearly explained that when he asked where she came from, he meant her past life, and she answered truthfully that she did not know. When he asked where she was going, he meant her future rebirth, and she answered truthfully, that she did not know. When he asked if she knew she was going to die, she answered truthfully, that yes, she absolutely knew that fact. And when he asked if she knew exactly when she would die, she answered beautifully, that no, she did not know the exact time. The Buddha completely validated her profound, quiet wisdom, proving that her words, though entirely misunderstood by the loud, quick judging crowd, were actually the absolute, highest form of pure, awakened truth. This beautiful, completely profound encounter serves as a powerful, brilliant reminder for all of us, everyone. How often do we instantly judge someone, getting deeply angry, or totally offended, simply because they used the wrong tone, or they did not express themselves, in the exact, perfect way, that we expected. We are so quick to jump to harsh, angry conclusions, completely missing the deep, hidden meaning, or the quiet, unspoken pain, entirely resting beneath their clumsy, awkward words. If we want to truly heal our relationships, we must learn to listen, exactly like the Buddha listened, completely looking past the dusty surface, to find the beautiful, shining truth, inside the other person's heart. Sometimes, people say things that sound completely sharp, or entirely dismissive, but if you look closely, with a highly compassionate, deeply patient ear, you might realize that they are just incredibly tired, entirely overwhelmed, or deeply afraid. Instead of instantly snapping back, with your own sharp words, you can choose to softly ask a clarifying, gentle question, entirely giving them the safe space to express what is truly, deeply bothering them. This kind of profound, patient listening is one of the highest, most beautiful forms of true generosity, entirely proving that you care more about their fragile heart than you care about winning a fleeting, meaningless argument. We must also gently consider the immense, quiet power of absolute, beautiful silence. In a world that is constantly screaming, completely obsessed with endless talking, endless debating, and endless, loud opinions, choosing to simply remain silent is often the most profound, deeply healing statement a person can possibly make. Silence is not an empty, dead void, friends, it is a vast, rich, incredibly fertile space, where true understanding, and genuine, lasting peace, can finally begin to grow. When you sit quietly with someone who is grieving, entirely refusing to fill the heavy air, with completely useless, empty platitudes, your beautiful silence speaks volumes of pure, unconditional love. There is a profound, deeply mysterious, ancient story, about a highly advanced, radiant heavenly being, named Brahma Sahampati. When the Buddha first attained absolute, complete enlightenment, sitting quietly under the magnificent, spreading branches, of the Bodhi tree, he initially thought that the truth he had discovered was simply too deep, too subtle, and far too complex, for the dusty, angry world to ever understand. He briefly considered remaining completely silent for the rest of his life, entirely keeping the profound, beautiful peace, completely to himself, rather than trying to explain it to a blind, deaf world. It was at this exact, pivotal moment, in the entire history of the world, that the radiant Brahma appeared before him. The heavenly being did not use a booming, loud, commanding voice to order the Buddha to teach, nor did he use harsh, demanding words of heavy obligation. He simply knelt down on the soft earth, joined his hands together in absolute, profound reverence, and used a voice of pure, unshakable, gentle supplication. He softly pleaded, saying that there were still a few beings, with only a little dust in their eyes, who would completely perish, if they did not hear the beautiful, healing words of the true, awakened path. That one, single, beautifully spoken request, entirely motivated by pure, boundless compassion, completely changed the Buddha's mind, opening the floodgates of profound, life-saving wisdom for the rest of human history. The voice of that one, gentle being, asking beautifully on behalf of the suffering world, is the exact reason we have these ancient, comforting teachings today. It completely proves that even the most enlightened, deeply peaceful mind can be beautifully moved and entirely guided by the soft, sincere, respectful words of a truly caring heart. This means that your voice, everyone, has the exact same, limitless potential to completely change the course of history, even if it is just the quiet, personal history of your own, small family. When you choose to speak up for someone who is completely voiceless, when you gently encourage a friend who has totally given up hope, or when you softly plead for peace in the middle of a bitter, heavy family argument, you are acting exactly like that beautiful, heavenly being. You are using your words as a golden, shining key, completely unlocking the hidden, beautiful potential in the people around you, and gently guiding them toward the bright, open sky of true freedom. Let us completely release the heavy, dark burden of forcing ourselves to always say the exact, perfect, highly philosophical thing. You do not need to be a grand scholar, you do not need to read 1,000 complex ancient scrolls to master this profound, beautiful art. The only true qualification for speaking words that save lives is a highly sincere, deeply open, and entirely compassionate heart. If your intention is pure, if your ultimate goal is simply to bring a tiny bit of comfort to a heavy, aching world, your words will naturally and beautifully arrange themselves into the exact, perfect, healing medicine that is so desperately needed. So, as you walk out into the bright, busy world today, or as you sit quietly, in the comforting stillness of your own room, remember the immense, terrifying, and absolutely beautiful power resting right there, on the tip of your tongue. Choose to speak the soft, rhythmic words that calm the raging elephants of anger. Choose to listen past the dusty surface, to hear the deep, radiant truth, and choose to plant beautiful, glowing seeds of hope in every single, quiet conversation. Your voice is a magnificent, entirely beautiful instrument of peace, designed to completely uplift, to deeply heal, and to forever comfort every single soul that is lucky enough to hear it.